right. We are back with live streaming again. Before we were doing live webinars, I got my feet wet, It's been a while since I have been doing live streams. I wanted to test it out a little, see how it goes, and then go back to live streams. We're back to live streaming, so welcome. If you're out there, feel free to say hello. Let us know where I always want to say where you're calling from, but let us know where you are watching from. So feel free to say hello. I'm your host, Dr. Sheldon L. Eakins, host of the Leading Equity Podcast, founder of the Leading Equity Center, and I'm also the host of the weekly show, The Art of Advocacy. So we have Judy is here. Welcome, Judy. Thank you so much for joining us, representing Maine, East Coast. Nice. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic, I'm bringing that up for you so you can see what we got going on. Today's topic is embrace your inner cheapskate, the price of daily affirmations at school. Price of daily affirmation. We'll get into it. I might get a little preachy. Sometimes I get a little preachy. But I get amped up. So as always, feel free to jump in, put your comments in, put your chat in. We love those things. Yes, got to give a plug to the Leading Equity book. If you haven't picked up the book yet, please support your boy. Pick up a copy of this book here. You can find it at your local retailer as well. So feel free to support as well. All right. By the way, I do have a topic for next week, so I'm getting myself a little bit more organized these days. I actually talked to a book publisher, but I am entertaining a couple opportunities or options when it comes to book deals. So I'm writing as I go and I'm presenting as I go as well. So I'm a little bit more organized nowadays because when you send in a book proposal, they want to know what you got going on. It can't just be a bunch of stuff all over the place, which is kind of how it was a couple weeks ago. So I'm more organized. So I actually have a topic for next week and I'll share that at the end. So you got to hang on and you'll get that. But in the meantime, I love audience, I can put stuff together, but I always want to know what you would like to see as well. So if you got a sense of belonging topic for next week, put that in the chat. That way I can take a look at that and I'll consider it and possibly be able to do something on that, depending on the topic. So far, the last couple sessions have been audience submitted. So based off of that. So just keep that in mind. As always, I ask that you arrive on time, be kind and respectful of others' comments and thoughts, take turns sharing, bring questions, stay on topic, and let's have some fun. All right, let's get into it. Oh, one more thing. I always forget. This is a brave space. So yeah, I start talking and you may not agree with everything I say, and that's totally fine. I'm totally fine with that. I will never jump on you at all. So yes, this is a brave space. I want you to share. If you have a difference of opinion, please put that in the chat. That's helpful for me as well. Because I just, I want to know where you're coming from. Okay. I think that's fair. All right. Today's agenda: affirming the needs of students in a caring system. And then we'll move into constructing positive affirmations. And I'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A. We can't go any further without establishing the formula. All right, we're talking about a sense of belonging all summer. All summer, we're going to be talking about a sense of belonging. And it's very important that we understand that when it comes to creating a sense of belonging for your students, we must have, or your students must feel accepted, included, and supported. That is the guiding principle for the book, for this work, sense of belonging, social emotional learning, all those kind of things. The student must feel accepted, included, and supported. From your bus driver, which is often the first person an individual sees. A student, their first interaction with a staff is often a bus driver. Okay. From the person that's welcomed them into the door, from the last person that they see, which might be that bus driver as well. Okay. So from beginning to the end, they must feel these things. Okay. Now, question came up. Let's see. How can teachers belong when administration and new employees treat the senior teachers as a past unrelevant resource. It sounds like a topic, Judy. Thank you for bringing it up. I will put that in my list of things to take a look at. I actually have some leadership stuff as well. I have a whole training for leadership. It's called The Staff and the Furious. And that's part of it, creating a sense of belonging for your staff as well. So, we do talk a lot about students, but also we want to make sure that we're retaining our staff as well. So I do have some information and I might share that down the road. But that's a really good topic. Thank you for that. All right, let's talk about affirming the needs of students in a caring system. All right, now the first thing I want to do is, y'all know how I am. I like to start with definitions. Okay, so last week I pulled up assimilation, the definition of assimilation, and I utilized that with Webster's dictionary. I didn't like the definition. All right, there's some verbiage in that definition of assimilation last week. I wasn't really just a fan of, so I was like, all right, let me see what dictionary.com talks about this week. So to affirm is to state or assert positively, maintain as true. Okay. Now, what does that mean in a school setting? First thing I say, to affirm does not mean that we're going to be selective with our affirmation. Now, here's the thing. We all have bias, right? I talk about it all the time. We all have some sort of bias, including myself. Okay. Now, because of those biases, which are often due to the way we grew up, the news stations that we watch, media, those kind of things, our social circles, they influence our beliefs and our opinions, and we start stereotypes as well, right? All these kind of things shape the way we view things. So when we're talking about affirming a student, which is to state or assert positively and maintain as true. So that doesn't mean, oh, well, I agree with some of the things that the student is saying, but there's some things morally or religiously I don't believe in, and so I'm going to be selective affirming. No, when we're saying that we're going to affirm student, that means we're going to affirm all of our students. Okay. I'll give you an example. I remember in the past I've worked with students that were trans or students that were gender fluid, and they would say, my pronouns are they or them or something like that. And I remember staff would refuse. They would refuse to utilize those pronouns. And as a result, they would still say in the same conversation, they say, oh yeah, I agree with equity and social justice and all these things. However, they're very selective with that. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. When we're talking about we're going to affirm our students, can't be a selective of affirmations. Okay. This needs to be something that we recognize within, as Judy said, all students here, all students. Very good. Yeah. And I totally agree with that. And I think that's really where we have to start. That's very important, especially with everything that we have going on. I mean, there's literally laws that are being passed or bills that are up in order to change a lot of things as far as our conversations, things that we can say. I saw all these memes, like Juneteenth just happened. I saw these memes that talked about, the irony or gaslighting, where we're saying, oh, we're going to pass Juneteenth and make it a federal holiday. However, we can't talk to our students about what Juneteenth is, right? Because of, critical race theory and all these other stuff, right? So I think, again, going back, we need to make sure that we're affirming all students. Now, I had a conversation on my show, my podcast, with Dr. Kate Kennedy, and she talked to me about a caring system. And it's a really good episode. So if you want to check it out, there's that. That's the title of it. But Dr. Kate Kennedy, this was right around when the pandemic happened. So it was about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, when we did this interview. But a lot of the information that she shared with me was very important, and it's very related to a sense of belonging. And the thing about it is, she listed 6 things. 6 things when we're thinking from a systemic level, when we're thinking about it from a district level, right? Sometimes we talk about sense of belonging, and we often talk about it from a classroom standpoint, and I'll touch on that as well because I talk about it in my first book. However, she talks about it. Dr. Kennedy talks about it from a systemic level, especially at the district level, right? And so we're going to break down some of the things that she shares and what's needed within a caring system. So the first one is having a caring vision. Okay, this is really important. Having a caring vision. We have to start there. That's what sets the tone, right? When we say if I'm a student or a potential student, I'm just moving into a district, or let's say I'm a school choice situation and I'm trying to decide on which school I want to attend. What does the mission statement say? Do I see myself in that mission statement? So when we're talking about sense of belonging, we're talking about what am I saying that supports all identities, right? Now, often a lot of our mission statements come across as very academic focused. We believe in grades and all students can succeed and all those very general. I would even go as far as saying that a lot of those mission statements are very safe, right? Rarely do they utilize any language that centers around sense of belonging or care. I've seen some, but it's not always the case. And then on top of that, mission statements often lack affirmations of students outside of the dominant, or if you were with me last week, we talked about the embracing culture, right? That's an assimilation, right? So a lot of times mission statements often lack those affirmations of students outside the the dominant culture. Okay. So that leads me to my next question. Is it time to revisit your mission or vision statement? Is it time? Here's the thing. Yesterday, I was doing a presentation with a group, an institution of higher education. This were doctoral, professors, staff members at the higher ed level. And after the session was over, session one that we did was on how we can be allies and support others and things like that. But after the session was over, a couple questions came up. Some of the audience members were like, "Hey, do you got a couple more minutes? Love to ask you a few questions." And in their state, there's some laws. There's some legislation that's out there. There are anti-trans laws that are out there. And the question that was raised to me was, should we do something about this now? Like right now, there's this, from the I don't know, from the Congress side of things, there's talks about a law being passed, but we don't agree with that. As a university, we do not agree with that. And we know that there's students that have certain identities that it's going to impact. What do you think we should do? Should we jump ahead of this? And I said, absolutely. We have to be proactive when it comes to this, right? Don't wait for something to happen, because when you wait for something to happen, then you might end up finding yourself in deeper water, if you will. Right. I told him, I said, look, you don't want to be on the news for the wrong reasons, where students are posting on, with our access to social media these days, where students are posting online, creating profiles, and our school doesn't care about us, bottom line. So if we wait for laws to pass, but we know that there's talks, there's rumbling already happening, let's be proactive. Put out a statement. And don't put out a statement from just a like from as high as you can go up, right? Because your school leaders, your presidents, your CEOs, they are the chief diversity, equity, inclusion officers, right? We'll talk about funding in a second, but they are your chief DEI folks, right? Even if you have a designated position on campus or within your district, doesn't matter, right? Your chief diversity, equity, inclusion officer is going to be your leadership, school district wide. Okay. So it's important to be proactive when it comes to saying, listen, we don't agree with the legislation that's happening, or we don't agree with these recent things that are happening within our community. This is what we stand upon. Here's our stance. We stand in solidarity with X group, right? Sometimes we'll do stuff that's performative. We'll change our our profile pictures to match the latest trend. This is happening. This social justice movement is happening. This hashtag is happening, and we post it on our Facebook profile and we change our page. But that's it. That's as far as it goes. Nothing else to accompany that. That's it. So what we should do is try to be proactive and say, you know what? It is 2023. When was our mission or vision statement created? How long has it been? And does it still reflect what's happening in 2023? Post-pandemic. Is it still relevant? Or are there some tweaking that needs to take place within our mission and vision statement? Because this is what guides our schools, our organizations, is our mission and vision statement. Okay? That's the words. Let's move on. Number 2, staffing and organizing for care. Right? Dr. Kennedy talks about staffing and organizing for care. Now, what does that mean, Dr. Eakins? Well, let me share. Okay? Let's think about our teams. Okay? When we think about our leadership team specifically, okay, who's on that team and what are their beliefs? There's an old saying we used to say, was it all skin folk ain't kin, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. What does that mean? You might say, oh, look at my leadership cabinet, my executive cabinet. We got folks from all various walks of life, which I believe is very good, right? That diversity. But do you have diversity in thought as well? Because if you got, a quote unquote melting pot of executives on your team, but there's no real diversity in thought, they're all coming from the same mindsets, or, again, based off of biases or experiences of individuals, if there isn't a lot of representation from various groups with lived experiences that can speak on the policies and systems that we're discussing, that's a challenge. Okay, so the question is, I actually have 2 questions. 1, who's represented? Okay, and again, what are their beliefs? Not just your representation, but what are their beliefs? Does it align, going back to your mission statement, does it align with your mission statement? The next question is, okay, so we just discussed who is represented, but who is not represented. And I think this is a piece that's forgotten a lot. All right, who is not at the table, if you will. All right, and here's the thing. I'll ask a principal. I say, okay, let's have this conversation about representation. Right, and they'll say, we're actively or we're intentionally trying to hire more folks that will represent our student body. Right, currently our staffing does not reflect our student body. I said, I'm glad you're being intentional. I'm glad that you're doing this work. But the question that I have, in addition to yourself, who else is on your hiring committee? When you're looking at a new counselor, when you're looking at a new teacher, new staff member, paraprofessionals, all those things, do you have students? Do you have students on those hiring committees? And folks will forget about that. Oh yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. Didn't think about that. Which, hey, I'm not coming for folks like that. What I'm saying is that's something that we don't always consider. Why is that important? Why is it important to have students, maybe even parents, on your hiring teams when you're looking at hiring new staffs? Okay. Well, who's going to be impacted the most? Not your colleague, not your assistant principals and whoever else is on your traditional hiring committees, but your students. Those are the ones that they're going to see the most. I think students should have an input when it comes to who's going to be in front of them in their classrooms. Okay, so not only your students, but also your parents. I think that's something that we forget, right? And again, best intentions. It happens. But that's if you're in a leadership position and you're watching this right now, and summer's coming up right now. right? And you're looking at hiring 4 new staff. If there's a way that you can pull in, I don't care if you're at the elementary level, pre-K level, whatever level you're at, I recommend that you get some students on. Here's the thing I used to do when I was a school principal and I was hiring a staff member, a new teacher, something like that. I would intentionally try to schedule those interviews during like recess times, things like that. And I would take the candidates around, and here's a tour of the school. This is, this would be that area. This is where you'll be teaching, that kind of thing. And I would take them out during lunchtime or recess, and I would sit there and watch how those teachers or potential candidates would interact with the students. I would have some teachers that would literally, candidates would just talk to me. I mean, they would look and see what's going on, but they would not interact. And you know how kids are, kindergartners, first graders, those young kids, especially, they're like the nicest kids ever. If they see the principal walking, they're already like, hey, principal, how you doing? But on top of that, they want to know who's next to them. They're coming up to you and they're saying, hey, principal, who is this? And I would watch how those candidates would interact with students. If a candidate would not even look at them, or again, focus on me only, depending on how they interact, I'd be like, I would already know. Yeah, I don't think this candidate is the best fit for this school. Because my goal here is to make sure that whoever is in front of our students get a say with that. And from the jump, they're interacting even before they get a job. This is not just a paycheck for them, but this is something where they genuinely like and care about kids. I think that's important. All right. So think about that. Who is represented in your leadership and who is not? Okay. Your support staff is great. Sometimes people will tell me, oh, well, if you look at our support staff, our paraprofessionals, custodians, and things like that, they represent our student body. And okay. However, can we go further than that? Because to me, that's not enough. It's not good enough. Right? We could do better. Right? I think that's a great start. However, I don't think that's where that can't be your reasoning. You can't just say, oh, well, we got some staff, but there's support staff that represent. No. Okay. When it comes to your executive teams, your leadership team, are all your black males just disciplinarians? You have black males on or Hispanic males on your curriculum and instruction committees or leadership? Or are they only just relegated to maybe athletic directors, deans of something, deans of students? Okay. All right. Number 3, resourcing for care. Now, this one might be a little touchy. And here's what I mean by that. Resourcing for care. We talked about the mission statement. That's where we start. Okay. And then we move into looking at what does your staff look like? Okay. Now it's time to put our money where our mouth is. So here's some actionable questions coming. Okay. When it comes to resources, if your mission says one thing, does the money say the same? Is there an alignment there? I think that's important. Okay. Now I get it. Here's the thing. I was a principal. I get funding is not always the easiest. Right. I've done special ed. Funding is not always the easiest to make sure that the resources are there. I wish they put more money into such as mental health support. I see a lot of schools, unfortunately, will spend all their money on school resource officers and metal detectors, but they won't put that same energy and money towards mental health support, social workers, counselors, mental health counselors, things like that. Trauma-informed care practices. I think every teacher should have trauma-informed care background or instruction. Okay. But unfortunately, allocations of funds is not the same. We see And I would even venture off and say, often we don't even have a lot of our those who like, let's say your financial folks, your budgeting folks, your that department don't always talk to the curriculum folks. They don't always talk to the counseling folks. And then as a result, there's a miscommunication with the needs that are there. Now, I believe that curriculum is important. Curriculum and instruction is important. Definitely. Absolutely. So I'm not one who will say that curriculum and instruction is not important. It is. It is. But there's some canned curriculum and instruction that's out there. I mean, some stuff is very scripted. Some things is, again, if we're thinking from an equitable standpoint, we want to make sure that it's meeting the individual needs of students. I would like to see a lot more funding go towards our mental health support. Okay. Uh yeah, bottom line, I would like to see more funding go there as opposed to some of the other directions. Okay. Again, academics are very important, but social and emotional care is also important. Okay. Um, let's see. Some of the comments coming in. Teach teachers because we need it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. There's a lot. And if we need it, the students need it, benefits everybody. It's a win-win. But I get it. Sometimes funding is not always relatively available, and it can be a challenge. I understand that. But that goes back to your mission statement. Does your mission statement and your money, are they talking to each other? Are they best friends? Because they should be. Number 4, data in the service of care. Data in the service of care. All right, Dr. Eakins, what are you talking about? What does that mean? All right, well, let's talk about that for a second. Okay. At the end of the day, the question that we need to be asking is, are you asking the right caring questions? Okay. Uh, we do a lot of map testing. We'll test into, certain programs. We do, your standardized testing, all those things. But how many of those tests that we do are related to a student's experience as a student? I've said before, a couple weeks back on a live stream, I mentioned, I'm in a process of putting together a sense of belonging instrument. I don't want to call it an audit. I'm afraid to call it an assessment either. More of an instrument. I don't know if it's a semantic thing. So, hey, maybe it's a semantic thing, but it's some sort of an instrument that we can utilize in our schools, that we can not just do one time, but it's something that we can utilize to find out what are your students' experiences. Do they feel accepted? Do they feel included? Do they feel like they're supported? I get that we do our baseline testing and we do our national testing and ACTs and SATs, and APs, and all these alphabet soups. However, at the end of the day, are we asking the questions to our students? Dude, is everything okay? Are we asking those questions? Do we show our kids that we care? Right? That's the instrument that I'm putting together, and I'm taking my time with it because I want to be very intentional with that, because it needs to be measurable. Okay, I can say, I want to find it out, because I know there's so many times we've had these conversations where we'll say, oh, our students feel like they belong, or our students think that they are our kids are doing great. But if I ask that same question to students, especially students that are not part of dominant culture, and I ask them, do you feel like you belong? Do you feel included, accepted, and supported? I might get a different answer. Okay. So again, are we asking caring questions in our approach? Judy says, exit tickets can help here. Yeah. Yeah. Exit tickets can help. But I also want to just again, just thinking from a measurable goals, and just kind of thinking from a higher standpoint when it comes to just getting that data, I think it's really important that we really are intentional with asking those kind of questions. It could be anonymous. Sometimes we're afraid to get that feedback because kids can be harsh sometimes. But I think it's really, really important. All right, the next one, number 5, thinking about community responsive, equity oriented care. Okay, thinking about community responsive, equity oriented care. All right, here's the thing. You looked at your mission statement. Okay, our mission statement makes sense. It's not just a safe mission statement. It's not just, your usual buzzwords. All kids this, and we believe in no matter what your, the typical, right? We have added some caring, some sense of belonging language within our mission statement. We've put in the work, we put in the reps. So that way our community, our stakeholders know this is what drives us. Okay. Now we've looked at our staffing. We looked at our leadership. Those who are at the table. Okay, reflects our students. There's representation. Not only just representation in how folks look and present, but also there is diversity in thought. All right, now we've looked at the data. We've asked those questions. We've made sure that we found the funding, resources that are available to meet the needs of our students. Right? Maybe mental health is a thing in your area. Maybe it's social emotional learning. Maybe it's social economic stuff. Maybe it's trauma informed care. Whatever it might look like for your specific area. We've looked at those and we've made sure that there's funding to be available as well. And again, we've asked those questions through data, and now we have that information now. Okay, so next steps is what's next? Because we all know change doesn't happen overnight. Okay, change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and it's something that you have to think about what it's going to take us 1 year, what might take us 6 months, what might take us 3 years. What are those next steps? Don't just sit on things, but start revisiting your strategic plan. Okay, again, this might be time for us to look at it post-COVID. I don't know if it's post-COVID, right? Because COVID's still out there, but I don't know. Pandemic. Let's just call it post-pandemic, right? But what's next? Okay. And then once you start figuring out what's next, the last one here, number 6, caring leadership moves. Caring leadership moves. What do you mean? See, if you listen to the podcast, we talk about being an advocate. Okay. Now, I consider myself an equity advocate. Okay. An advocate is someone that recognizes that we do not live in a just society. Advocates are willing to speak up on behalf of others. Okay. Now, being a broker, when you think about from a leadership standpoint or from a resources standpoint, let's call it that way. If I am able to connect an individual who has needs, or if I can support an individual by putting 2 folks together or reaching out to an organization, or I know this person or I know that person, or my spouse knows this person or knows that person, or my neighbor, my friends, if I'm in a position where I can connect folks, to connect those resources, to tap into things, or we can pull together, maybe I could reach out to the next district over, say, hey, listen, we really want to bring in this individual to help us with some trauma-informed care. We got a bunch of staff members that need some training, but we don't have all the funding ourselves. Can we pull together our resources? Can we collaborate? Can we work together so that we can all get the training? I think it'll benefit both districts, because the reality is people move from one district to the next. Wouldn't it make sense for us all to be able to have that same training, some cohesion? Can we pull those resources together? That's part of being a broker. Reaching out, connecting folks. If I say that I'm an advocate, then I should also be willing to utilize whatever privilege I might have, whatever resources I might have access to ultimately ensure that individual needs are being met, everyone wins. Everyone wins. So when we talk about what's the cost of affirming your students on a daily basis, starts with your mission statement. That doesn't cost you anything, but it sets the tone. It sets the tone. Okay, let's move into constructing positive affirmations. All right, this is more for the teacher side. All right, in my book on page 47, chapter 2, I talk about constructing positive affirmations. Okay, and it says, due to implicit bias, we sometimes prejudge students based on their appearance or their names. Using positive affirmations with your students is one way to mitigate this bias. Okay. What does that look like? Let's get into it. When we're talking about constructing bias, I'm sorry, not constructing bias, constructing positive affirmations. Okay. The first one is in your classroom, and you can do this in the beginning of the school year, right? But you want to make a collective classroom affirmation statement. Okay, you want to make sure that that's visual, display it prominently in your classroom. All right, again, sets the tones for the year, and it creates buy-in from your students because they played a part in putting together this classroom affirmation. So yes, your school has its mission statement. Your classroom has its affirmation, affirms, it supports that mission statement. So maybe do an activity with your students where, give them 3 to 5 minutes to journal or to write down. If money's not an issue, resources is not an issue, what does a perfect classroom look like to you? Have your students create what that looks like. Put that together. That can be part of that mission state. I'm sorry, that affirmation statement for your classroom, and recite it every day. Right now, I know some folks, some classrooms, they'll do like call and response. Other folks will have like hand gestures or whatever it is, but make sure it's creative. And again, that sets a tone and creates a lot of buy-in for your classroom. Not only that, but we also should revisit and reflect on your classroom affirmations often. Okay, so again, saying it daily. Maybe middle of the year, we ask the class, "Hey, do we still feel good with the statement? Are there some tweaks that we should make based off of how the school year has gone? Are there some changes? Are there some things we should take out or should be added?" Okay. Final thoughts. Once again, the formula is accepted, included, and supported. This is what guides us throughout when it comes to creating a sense of belonging. Those things are important. Starts with your mission statement, your representation, your allocation of funding, your attention to this work, and understanding that, okay, now that we have a plan or at least an idea of where things are going, and we've asked our community how they're feeling, what's the plan, and how do we get those resources that we need? Okay. But again, it all boils down to accept it, include it, and support it. Bottom line, at the end of the day, you cannot do the vital work of supporting students' social and emotional needs and helping them feel like they belong without affirming their race, gender, sexual orientation, and ethnicity. You can't. Okay, you must be like this can't be, oh, we can't talk about these things. Okay, then you're erasing people's identities. Again, a lot of our kids have multiple identities, right? So maybe a lot of these things, very intersectional. Could be challenges for certain, folks of color, gender, sexual orientation, and ethnicity. All of that can be rolled into one student. You know what I'm saying? So that's very important. Okay, that's pretty much wraps up today. Again, if you got a sense of belonging topic for next week, put it in the chat. Judy, I saw that you put yours in about teachers. How can teachers belong when administration and new employees treat the senior teachers as a past unrelevant resource? Okay, so like I said, I do have a training on that. I actually will be giving a training in St. Louis next month for a group of principals in regards to that. But that's a great topic. I'll see if I can put it together for a webinar style, a free webinar style via YouTube. But it's a really good topic, so I appreciate you chiming that in. Next week, the topic will be well-being at the core. Prioritizing attachment theory. We're going to be talking about attachment theory next week for social and emotional learning in schools. Okay. I'll share some information, some research that I've actually, working on today's presentation. I came across a lot of research on attachment. It's like, oh yeah, this is definitely next week. This is what we're talking about next week. So that will be coming up. So if there are any questions, put them in the chat. If not, we'll wrap it up for today. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop that in. I'm going to take a sip of water. Brother was thirsty. All right. If there's no questions, we're going to keep it moving. As always, again, I think sense of belonging is very important for all students. Okay, for all students. Someone asked me, how are your children? Well, my children are doing okay. They're doing fine. They're summertime right now. Let me just pull that up. The question was, how are your children? They're good. I got two. So my daughter's 13 and my son is 10. And they're enjoying their summer break. Took them to the pool last week. And I'll probably take them again. They love swimming and going out to the lazy river and everything in the local park here. So they're doing great. Thank you for asking. Other than that, remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Let's continue to be a voice leading equity.